Okay, we, Be'ezrat Hashem, going to start a small series on explaining lightly the different styles of prayers, what we call a Nusach, in terms of Jewish prayers. Now, a Jewish prayer, there were many efforts of uniforming the whole, especially after the establishment of the State of Israel, to try to make it, everybody should pray the same, and the same effort happened by Sephardim as well, mainly by Rabbi Ovadia. He tried to uniform the whole method. Of course, there's something great about it that everybody feels comfortable with the prayer, but together with that, there's a tremendous loss of the cultural aspects as it comes out to prayer. There's no such thing as far as I'm concerned. This version of prayer is better than the other, and so on and so forth, because I really feel that the quality of the prayer is not necessarily by the words that you just say, more of the intent that you have in your heart. But being a Sephardi, so we're going to start with the Sephardi Nusach of Tefillah. What we call today Nusach Sfaradim, the Sephardic version of prayer, is what is established today as the most common way of prayer by Sephardic Jews, and most of those who are from the what we call Edot HaMizrach, the Oriental, what we call Oriental Jews, besides Yemenite Jews. They have their own ordeal as it is. Now, Sfaradim originally were those who came out of Spain and Portugal that maintained throughout their diaspora, those years of exile, their Jewish identity and the Spanish language / Ladino, which is a different topic again altogether. They were extremely dominant in terms of, and very advanced in terms of the culture and Torah. So in many places where they went, excuse me, they became the ones who set the tone for tefillah. Now, at the time, I mean, we're talking about recent years, it became Sfaradim ve'edot HaMizrach Ayin Mem, what we call. But before, it was what we call Minhag Sfaradim. Today we call it Sfaradim ve'edot HaMizrach for many reasons. One of the reasons is that in the past, a part of Edot HaMizrach did not use the Sephardic version. For example, Persian Jews had their own thing, and so on and so forth. And the other one, they call it, and it's so funny to me, they call it Sfaradim ve'edot HaMizrach, not to confuse it with what the Hasidim call Nusach Sfard, or Nusach Sfarad, which is by itself, I think, a mistake. So we had to give up, and we have to kind of reinvent ourselves as an ethnic group within the Jewish people, not to confuse ourselves with those Hasidim who daven like that, different. And the reason why the Hasidim, and we're going to make, God willing, another segment on the Hasidish, what we call Nusach Sfarad, because of the tendency of those people, those groups, that they want to pray closer to the Ari Nusach, which is a whole misconception as it is by itself. So there are some who separate between the verse or the version of the Iraqi Jews to the other Sfaradim, mainly Northern African, but also Sfaradim from the Balkan area, which is Yugoslavia, Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria, and those areas. Today, because of the great influence that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef had on that, it became almost the version which is associated most with Sephardim, but it's not really what it was. I mentioned yesterday, if you want to look at different ones, for example, and I myself, one of the things that I like to collect I like to collect few things, not so many things, few things. But one of the things that I like to collect is Sidurim for different Eidot. So one of my favorite Sidurim, and I encourage anybody who wants to do it, is just get yourself a hand on the Zichron Yosef from the Sephardic Jews, the Turkish and Rhodes Jews from Seattle. It is made very, very well, and that's probably one of the less Sidurim that you're going to find that is not an Iraqi Sidur. Rav Ovadia put it out. The Sukkot David Sidur at the time, when it came out, was really based on Nusach Baghdad. And later on, since Rav Ovadia was more Iraqi, they kind of pushed this, and then today it became the go-to Nusach. But that's not really the case. There were many other Nuschot. For example, and today they're gone. There is the Nusach Romaniutes. The Romaniutes were Jews, or Byzantine Jews, that mainly lived in certain areas of what it is today Greece, and at the time Turkey. Many of them, my family, interesting enough, from both sides, have Romaniutes or Byzantine Jews roots in them. Families like Mizrahi, families like Pesach, and so on and so forth, these are Romanute names because, you can tell, Mizrahi from the east and so on. But there were other minhagim of tefillah, and I kind of like it, that those people all of a sudden wake up and say, wait a minute, this is not what we used to daven. And I really got to hold it for and really salute to those people, mainly Moroccan and Northern African Jews. They said, wait, this is Iraqi stuff. This is not what we used to daven, and they put it on their own Sidurim. But it's different than, let's say, Northern Africa, Balkans, Egypt, and Syria. They were all at the time based on, which we have the Sidur here, it's called Sidur Tfilat HaChodesh. Those places was more, we have it, let me see, give me the red one. Thank you. So this Sidur is Tfilat HaChodesh. It was put out at a time by this publication called Sinai. Very hard to get. It became very not popular. It was the go-to Sidur for really hundreds of years. I have at home a Sidur similar to that, an older publication from 1834 that my grandfather used. And it's very interesting because all the words and all the footnotes are all in Ladino, in Ktav Rashi, but they're all in Ladino. So that's why they daven. So in Syria, in Egypt, in Morocco, and most of Northern Africa, they used that Sidur, or that version, or what they used to call also Sidur Livorno, because at the time it was a big publication house in Livorno, Italy, and that's where they used to call it Livorno, the Fus or Nusach Livorno. And today they used to call it Edot HaMizrach or Sfaradim Edot HaMizrach. However, really the differences are somewhat minor, but for me yet significant enough that I feel should not have been changed. In what we do today, there's more of a Kabbalistic influence and call it Kabbalistic manipulation than what it was originally. With all the respect to Kabbalah, Kabbalah should stay in Kabbalah, and Tefillah should stay Tefillah, and most people are not Kabbalists, so, but that's the way I call it like this. So, and the Kabbalah did come in and really changed a lot of things. Now, let's talk a little bit about the countries in which this Nusach was really accepted by. We start talking about it. So the origin of that way of prayer is really in Spain itself, before the expulsion of Spain, which happened when? Tisha B'Av 1492. Tisha B'Av 1492. And there were, even in Spain itself, there were different minhagim, different traditions of the regions. There were the main ones, but there were also local ones that were different. The main ones were Castilla, Catalonia, Aragon, and the minhag of Portugal. Now, it's very interesting because if you know a little bit of history, you know that in those countries, that those people who were expelled from Spain came in and they created their own kahalim. Kahal was a congregation. They basically created a community. So there was and you really see that in the centers of Judaism at the time, and the center of Torah at the time, and I dare to say that, in Saloniki, Adrianopolis, and in Turkey. There was always Kahal Aragon, Kahal Castilla, Kahal Portugal, and so on and so forth. My family, my father told me that many times they used to go to the Portuguese shul, or Portugal, what they used to call that synagogue in Izmir in Turkey. And there was in Greece, they were all arranged. There was, of course, the city had an umbrella organization, but every congregation had their own things, and they had their own Nusach. Slowly, and mainly because of economic difficulties, those things started to fall apart because at the time everybody had to go somewhere. But it was, and those places stay until today. Not in Greece because it was all burnt out. Unfortunately, the community of Greece, mainly because of the notorious all-time hatred of the non-Jewish population towards the Jews, and of course with what the Nazis had done afterward, really put a number and really erased a lot of those places that were in Saloniki and so on. It's really bad. I mean, talking about cemeteries, which the Turks themselves in Turkey did not. Until today, you can go to cemeteries that are like hundreds of years old in Turkey, but in Saloniki it was basically all plowed and they put a university on top of it and whatever. So. And there were also other minhagim besides those Catalonia, Castilla, Aragon, and Portugal. There were other ones, but after the expulsion from Spain, because of that, these became the more dominant. So the small ones disappeared, and they became more dominant. It's really hard for us to tell, which one from those versions we are talking about the most common one. But so therefore, what we have today is basically a combination of all these things put together. And it's hard to tell because Sidurim were not common. And if they had a Sidur, already printed Sidur, which was expensive, from usage, after a while they will put it in Geniza and they will get lost. So it's very hard to tell. But even in the period, the pro-modern era, the Nusach Sephardi was, in terms of geographic span, was the most dominant in the Jewish world, starting from the Jewish, Spanish Jewish new congregations that came, even in the United States, even in the Americas, because most of the immigrants, and you should know that the first Jewish immigrants to America did not come from Russia, did not come from Poland. They were Sephardim that established. You want to go to Rhode Island. The Turo Shul was a sort of Spanish Portuguese, or the Spanish Portuguese Shul, I think in Manhattan, was built, I don't know what, like 1600, 1700, something of that sort. So of course there's also the Spanish Portuguese, and that's different for them. Very interesting to me that today the Spanish Portuguese Shul is run by an Ashkenazi rabbi, but hey, one of those things. Yeah. So of course there were other, and those Spanish Portuguese shul were really a take on the Western European Sephardic shuls of Amsterdam, Hamburg in Germany. Many German Jews have their roots in Spanish Jews. They came from Spain, and mainly the community of Hamburg. So Amsterdam was very big. Until today, you can go to Spanish Portuguese shul in Amsterdam. Don't go to the red light district because it's a waste of time and a waste of your soul. But go to the Spanish Portuguese shul. Maybe you'll get some dust awaken on your roots. In Spain, in France, like areas of Bordeaux. Also, there was Spanish Portuguese Jews. So all these people, when they went to South America, they went to Paraguay, they went to Uruguay, they went to Venezuela. Yes, there were the waves of Ashkenazi Jews that escaped Russia from the Bolsheviks and so on and so forth. But the first one to establish that were Sephardic Jews, including the Caribbeans. Including the Caribbeans. In the Caribbeans, there were, until today, there are some synagogues that were established, and some pirates, Jewish pirates, but there were, in Jamaica, Bahamas, and so on and so forth, they were all Spanish Jews. Cuba, Dominican Republic, what it is today, all these places, there were Sephardic Jews, and later on, the Ashkenazim came in, they came with messes, and they kind of overwhelmed that. But when you're talking about Italy, we're talking about Italy. Italy, they had their own version, like Italians, they had their own version. And even in Italy, they had different versions. It was a little bit different in Rome, which was an extremely ancient community, to let's say Milan in the north, and Florence and Venice, and of course, without getting into the influence of Venice to the Sephardic communities in Greece and in Turkey, which is as a fascinating ordeal. It's to me, it's sometimes it's a sad point that many Jewish minds take all sorts of nonsense classes in college, but nobody even demands seeks to, and even if they have, will take a class in college about Jewish history or Sephardic Jewish history, about whether it's modern or ancient. I mean, that's your people. Why don't we learn it? So if you don't offer it in college, well, guess what? Instead of watching this podcast or the other podcast or reruns of Family Guy on YouTube, there are plenty of lectures that you can get your hands on in English, needless to say in Hebrew, from researchers from colleges about your culture. So make it your business, because you can't go forward if you don't know where you came from. You gotta know. You gotta set your peg in the past in order for you not to get lost in the future. And that's a given. So in Italy also, they had the Sephardic communities in Italy, and we're talking about the Balkans. We spoke about Bulgaria. We spoke about Turkey and those places like that, and of course Sephardic communities in Northern Africa, because there were the local Berber Jews that lived there beforehand, but there was the influx of immigrants that came from Spain and Portugal to places like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and so on. And those Jewish, and these are all places that daven Sephardim. So look at all the spectrum, from say South America to North America to Europe, large parts of Western Europe, through and around the Mediterranean, from, let's say, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and then Yugoslavia, what used to be Greece, Bulgaria, Saloniki, Turkey, and into the Middle East, because the Spanish Jews settled in the Middle East as well. Places like Israel. And guys, don't think that we invaded our own country. There was always a Jewish settlement in the Holy Land. Don't tell the nonsense in the media persuade you differently. If anybody invaded Israel, is those Arabs or the Muslims that today call themselves and reinvented the wheel and call themselves Palestinians. They are the one who invaded the land. It is our land, and we were always there. Let's make that clear. All the Sephardim that went from Spain to Haleb in Syria, to Beirut, Tyre, Tzfat, Yerushalayim, without a doubt. Yerushalayim was so Spanish Jewish that the common language in Jerusalem until the beginning of the 20th century was Ladino. I met one time, I was a kid, I was young, but I met at the time, she was 80, she looked to me like ancient, Ashkenazi woman who spoke Ladino better than me. And I was like, what? And she said to me, yes, that's what we spoke. The whole, what we call the Yerushalmi experience is based on those Sephardic Jews who lived there, because the Chachamim from Turkey and Izmir and so on came and settled down in Eretz Israel. All the Rishon LeZion were all Samech Tet, Sfaradi Tahor. Until the period of, like, let's say, Rav Ovadia and so on and so forth, they were all Samech Tet. They're all Spanish descent. And I would even say certain small parts of Iraq. So if you are, argument's sake, a Egyptian Jew, there's a greater chance that this is what you daven with rather than modern sidurins that we have. Now today, some other people, other Jewish ethnic groups, like for example the Ethiopian Jews or Jews from India, mainly the Indian Jews from Cochin and so on, accepted this upon themselves because of the geographic and ethnic, closeness that they felt towards Sephardim. So they adopted that. The ancient Ethiopian verse still uses what they call in Gaz, they use Amrehit, which is the Ethiopian language that they use, or Tigrit, but not really Hebrew. But many times when I was in Israel, I saw many Ethiopian Jews who just, go to regular Sephardi shuls and they daven like this because they feel close to that and they accepted that upon themselves. The Nusach, the Sephardic Nusach, was really rooted, strongly rooted, or maybe we can even say combined with Sfaradim, with local traditions, where, as we said before, where the Sfaradim were more dominant, the Spanish Jews were more dominant, like, for example, in Haleb in Syria. And if you look at Nusach Aram Tzuba, you would see the difference that they have there. Or when they're talking about the difference between, even in Northern Africa, between some of them that are less Sephardi than more Sephardi, so we will have it like this. And what we spoke before, in the Balkans, where we have the Roman youths, and today, I don't know what they use in Kehila Yanina, which is in New York. It's probably one of the last Kehilot of Roman youth or Byzantine Jews. I don't know which Siddur they use there. If they have their own Siddur that they use, I would hope they have it. I would recommend to you to actually get your hands on it, so you'll see these are still your people. Whether they share the same common name or not, they're still your people. So go look at it, become more, aware of your own traditions, and you'll see how it is. Even if there were places the influence was so great, it was so spread that even if the Megurashe Sfarad, those who were expected to didn't reach there, still the Nusach had an ability to change it, or somehow was changed. And this is, for example, you see in the Yemenite Jews, what the difference between what they call the Shami and the Baladi, the two different Nuschaot. Now the Baladi means the local ones, the one that they used, the Yemenite Jews they used before the influence of the Rambam and so on and so forth. The Shami is basically like Tfilat HaChodesh, is so much so Sephardi influenced, again, because a part of this Yemenite Jews had accepted upon themselves all the traditions of the Rambam, and that's the difference between the Shami and the Baladi. And believe me, it is very hard today to find, even in Israel, a real, and they call it Tachlal. It's very hard to find Siddur, Temani, and also because, I don't know, not so many bookstores, foreign stores in Israel the way they used to be. They just like what's common. So those things is just hard to get. If you go to Israel, so you know what to get. Instead of getting kachkes and all kind of like, souvenirs from Shuk HaKarmel, Shuk Machne Yehuda, or whatever it is that you go, or the old city, some stuff that who knows where the money is going to. Buy some Sidurim and then learn it, and then you'll see how beautiful that is. We already said before also about the difference between Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfarad, and the Hasidic influence in that. Now, if you take, for example, the Georgian Jews, they have a special Siddur. It's called Tfilat Raphael, and the Siddur of Zarach HaShemesh of Yehudei Morocco, or Shalom, the Siddur of the Libyan Jews, or if you talk about the Kol Yaakov, which is the Siddur Kol Yaakov, which is really the Syrian from Chaleb, right? Or if you talk, as we said before, about Sefer the Siddur Zechut Yosef, which is Zichron Yosef, Zechut Yosef, I'm not quite sure, which is the Siddur that were put out by the Turkish and Rhodesian Jews from Seattle, which is, I don't know, I just love the way they made that Siddur. Now, most of the chants or whatever that are in the Siddur Sfaradi were composed by the poets of the golden era of the Spanish Jews that really created certain structures and forms of poetry that was not common in Eretz Israel. They created their own thing. The Eretz Israel traditions of piyut, which is basically religious chanting, was completely almost pushed away from the Sephardic Siddur, and not like some of the minhagim in Europe that they took a lot of them, and when they created their own chants and their own religious chants, created new ones in the same style of the Eretz Israel Siddurim. And for example, if you're going to see, if you want to look at an extreme example of Eretz Israeli style Siddur in Spanish, chant in a Spanish Siddur, is what we call Seder Avodah Liyom HaKippurim, where we say Ata konanta olam merosh, right? So that is like they had it like that. That's more of a style like that. So when we have time?
Yeah.
So when the Jews settled down in Spain, we said the earliest Minhag Castilla, the Minhag of Catalonia, Aragon, and Portugal, that also changed in the way that they actually wrote the chants, the style of the chants, and which one actually penetrated those Sidurims as well. However, slowly, those differences have been erased, and most went to a similar version, or more uniform version, by omitting most of the piyutim. But maybe the main examples of them that didn't is some communities in Greece and some communities in Algeria that really kept the Minhag of Catalonia and Minhag Aragon. However, it's very difficult to find those things today, actually, to hold yourself a book like this, because of what had happened during the Holocaust to the Sephardic Jews. And yes, Sephardic Jews did go to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and Sephardic Jews also from Libya went to the camps. People don't know that, but you should know that as well. Because of the halachic resistance to say those piyutim inside the brachot, most of the piyutim were taken out, and they basically became like a form of like a prayer itself, and therefore they say either before or after prayer. Where in the Ashkenazim, sometimes when they open the Eichal, at certain occasions, when they do Chazara, or they open the Eichal, they say it over there, inside the Tefillah for Sfardim, they don't do it. You can look into the Shulchan Aruch when we're talking about Chazara and the laws of Kedusha, how does it come out? Now, for example, in the Venetian Siddur, right, most of the piyutim, most of the chants are from Rabbi Shemuel, even Gavirol, and they were said inside Chazarat HaShatz. And until today, many of the Western communities, Jewish communities of Western Europe, still say it like this. But in most communities, those are said before Musaf. Let's say, for example, we say Tfilat HaGeshem or Birkat Atal. They say it before Musaf. They say it inside the Tfilah itself. It's just an interesting note. Now, Another tremendous influence that was on the Sephardic version of prayer was really introduced by Rabbi Chaim Vital in Sefer Sha'ar HaKavanot. And over there he says was what he says his teacher, the Ari, used to pray, and basically he said, I'm going to, instead of copying it, I'm just going to say it's Nusach Sfarad. And really the main change in terms of the communities occurred in communities of Turkey, Balkan, most of Northern Africa. However, in Morocco, they accepted only few of those revisions that he made, but not all of them. And in Amsterdam, London, and all the other, what we call today Spanish Portuguese, they did not accept that. Like as you could see today in Congregation She'erit Israel in New York, which is the Spanish Portuguese shul, they don't have those Kabbalistic revisions on the tefillah itself, and therefore they did not change for that. The same for example, if you're going to find, an example for that, you're going to find in Sefer, of course there are other ones as well. I'll give you an example. In Musaf of Shabbat, right? On Shabbat itself, we say, and this is much later, we said, we don't say, let's say, we say Chemdat Yamim Oto Karata, and then most of the Sephardim stopped there, and they took out Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. And however, that is fine only in Sefer Chemdat Yamim. I don't know, maybe Sefer Chemdat Yamim wanted us to finish the verse in calling his name in the book, but not all Sephardim do that. So many Sephardim still have Chemdat Yamim Oto Karata, and they say Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. They don't stop there. Another great example for that is, according to the original Sephardic version of Tefillah, we say the following. We don't say Tikanta Shabbat Ratzita Kobenotea Tzivita Pirusha, and so on and so forth. Rather, they say LeMoshe Tzivita. They start, right? Baruch Ata Hashem Hayakel HaKadosh. LeMoshe Tzivita, and then they go on. We say, according to the Ari, no. We say different. We say Tikanta Shabbat. And that's why in most Faradim, they say Tikanta Shabbat, right? However, in Spanish Portuguese Jews and some Moroccan Jews, they left the words Le Moshe Tzivita. And for example, another thing is, during the Yamim Noraim, which we're just about to enter, the Ari did not like all the Spanish piyutim that we say. He took them all out. He said they should only say the kalir. But that did not penetrate the Sephardim, left it like this, the way it is. The Ari resistance on that was really because he felt that it's more philosophical rather than mystical. So, but that was not changed. But a lot of stuff was changed. So now, this is just like a very quick and superficial overview on what we call Nusach Sfaradim, the way the Sfaradim daven. You should know where it's coming from. I would encourage you to do further research on the matter, to really see it. And I would encourage you strongly to slowly, I don't have to go in once, because you're not going to be able to go in once, but slowly acquire different Siddurim in your home. And on your leisure time, just look at the differences. Look at the differences. I view tefillah as, first of all, a halachic requirement, but also of a way to self-express. And to really self-express yourself has to come really with connection to your roots. Otherwise, I will, self-express myself by doing some smudging and, doing some drum circling and, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about self-expression in terms of where my roots really are, to really bring it about. So that's what you should really, I would encourage you to do that. So look into that. It's okay to use it. It's not, you're not changing Sidrei Bereshit. On the contrary, if you're going to keep going, if you're going to go to this Tfilat HaChodesh, most likely it's going to be closer to what your ancestors did than what you're doing today. Because again, as we said today, most of the Sfaradim daven in somewhat of a Nusach Baghdad form of the Tfilah rather than what they did in their countries. So don't be lazy and don't feel intimidated by people that would look at you funny. Explore davening, explore tefillah, because tefillah is a wonderful thing. I'm going to tell you something. If a person would able to reach tefillah at a level of I call it almost a meditation. In other words, when you quiet your mind down and you have this pause from the chaos of life for 5 to 7 minutes, 3 times a day, probably that will be the greatest beneficial thing that you'll do in your life to really cure yourself from most diseases that you have. You're basically allowing your body to pause for 5 to 7 minutes, 3 times a day, and kind of leave everything behind. That really will cure your body from many diseases that we have. So when next time you have a chance to pray, take this into account. Take a time off from the madness of life and seek refuge in the arms of Hashem. And hopefully the tefillot will be accepted. Have a great day.